Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into Adam Grant's amazing book, Originals, to figure out what it really takes to go against the grain, champion a new idea, and, actually change the world. So let's just jump right in with a big question. When we look at people who really shake things up, the visionaries, the revolutionaries, we tend to think, wow, they must be built differently. They're just a different breed. But are they really?
Yeah, we have this myth of the original as some kind of fearless, risk-loving genius who's just separate from the rest of us. But what the book does so well is completely shatter that myth. It turns out the reality is that the people who drive change are often pretty cautious. They're full of self-doubt, and honestly, they're surprisingly ordinary. A lot more like you and me than we think. All right, let's unpack this first big idea, because if originals aren't just reckless daredevils, then what exactly are they? What's their secret? This quote really hits the nail on the head. Originals feel fear just like we do. The difference is they're not fearless. They're just better at managing their fear. And deep down, they actually want to avoid risk, which leads them to a really interesting strategy. And that strategy is built around this concept called a risk portfolio. Think about it like you would with your money. You probably wouldn't bet your entire life savings on one super risky stock, right? No, you'd balance it. Well, originals do that with their lives. They keep one area safe and secure, like a day job. And that security acts as a safety net, giving them the freedom to take huge creative swings somewhere else. And this isn't just theory. Just look at Steve Wozniak, the guy who actually built the first Apple computer. He was so scared of the risk that he flat out refused to leave his cushy engineering job at Hewlett-Packard, even while Apple was starting to take off. He was managing his risk portfolio, plain and simple. And the data completely backs this up. A huge study of thousands of entrepreneurs found that the ones who kept their day jobs while starting your company had a 33% higher chance of succeeding. The people who just quit their jobs and leaped, they were the ones who were most likely to fail. So the big takeaway here is that being an original isn't about being reckless. It's about being an expert risk manager. They balance their portfolio. They chip away at the risk of a new idea step by step. And they don't jump out of the plane until they've checked, double-checked, and triple-checked their parachute. Okay, so if originals are these careful, calculating planners, where do all the brilliant ideas come from? Are they just better shots? Do they have some kind of creative superpower the rest of us don't? Well, the answer is kind of simple. And it's another one of those big myth busters. It's not that creative geniuses have a better batting average. They don't have some secret formula. It's just they produce way, way more stuff, which, logically, gives them more chances to strike gold. I mean, just look at the numbers for some of the greatest composers in history. To get his 6 most famous masterpieces, Mozart had to write over 600 pieces of music. Beethoven, over 650 for his top 5. And Bach, the man wrote over 1,000 works to get his 3 most enduring masterpieces. It's a numbers game. You gotta kiss a lot of frogs. And this isn't just some old world principle. It's literally the secret sauce for modern viral hits. The website Upworthy, they famously test at least 25 different headlines for every single story. Their first idea might get, say, 8,000 views. But by the time they get to their 25th idea, suddenly it gets nearly 500,000. It just goes to show you, generating a ton of ideas is the most reliable way to land on a great one. All right, so you've de-risked your life, you've churned out a ton of ideas, and you finally found one that's a real gem. Now comes the really hard part. How do you convince skeptical, powerful people to actually listen to you? So the book introduces this really fascinating psychological tool, and it's called the Sarek effect. And the idea is pretty counterintuitive. When you're pitching an idea to a tough audience, you shouldn't just hide its flaws. You should actually lead with them. This is the type of what's called powerless communication, and it's incredibly effective. An entrepreneur named Rufus Griscom did this when he pitched his company Babbel to Disney. He literally started his presentation with a slide titled, "Here's Why You Should Not Buy Babbel." By pointing out all the flaws himself, he totally disarmed the execs. It made him seem smarter, more trustworthy, and it took all the ammo out of their hands.
They ended up buying his company for $40 million. A perfect example of the Sarek effect at work.
Okay, time for a little twist. Here's the thing. There is no Sarek effect. I kind of made that up. You see, I was using that little story to demonstrate another very real principle from the book. What you just experienced is something called the mere exposure effect. And it's simple. The more we see or hear something, a name, a song, an idea, the more we start to like it. It becomes familiar. By me repeating the fake term Sarek effect over and over, that new weird idea started to feel a little more comfortable, a little more real to you. And that's a huge lesson for any original. If you want people to accept a new idea, one of the best things you can do is make it feel familiar. So, what's the bottom line here? How do we take all these lessons and actually use them? How do we stop just accepting the way things are and start choosing to be original?
Well, it starts with a big mental shift. Most of us operate on what you could call a logic of consequence. We're always weighing the pros and cons. But originals, they often use a logic of appropriateness. They're not just asking, what's in it for me? They're asking a question about their identity. What does a person like me do in a situation like this? It totally reframes the decision.
So it really all comes down to a set of actions you can take. First, just question the default settings in your own life. Then, triple your creative output. Remember, it's a numbers game, all while keeping your life stable with a balanced risk portfolio. The book even argues for procrastinating on purpose, just to let your ideas marinate and get better. And finally, when you're ready to make your case, lead with the weaknesses to win people over. See? These aren't personality traits. They're choices. In the end, being an original isn't something you're born with or not. It's a choice you make day after day. And this quote from E.B. White just captures that tension so perfectly. Every day, we're torn. Do we just enjoy the world as it is? Or do we take on the messy, difficult work of trying to make it better? And like he said, that choice makes it pretty hard to plan your day. But that decision, the one between enjoying and improving, that's what defines everything. It's what defines your potential to actually make a difference. Originality isn't some gift from the heavens. It's right there, waiting for you to choose it. The only question left is, what are you going to do about it?